Hi, my name is François Duprat. I work for the English Montreal School Board, and today I'm going to show you how to use Meet with your classroom and answer a lot of the questions that teachers have had in our board. Now, the first thing you want to do before you start your Meet is make sure that you're signed into the Google browser. It will make everything a lot easier. So if you're signed into Chrome, great. Make sure you're in your EMSB account because you'll be able to access everything from your EMSB account if you're signed in. Next, we go to the waffle menu. And on the waffle menu, you'll notice that there's a direct link to Meet and there's also Classroom. Now, these might be in a different place in your browser. It's really up to you. If you'd like to change them, you can always drag them and assign them a slot. We never want to start with our students through Meet directly. We always want to go through Classroom because there's a few more security features if we launch Meet through Classroom. The biggest being is that only students in the classroom will be able to join without asking. So if you get people bombing your classroom or coming in without asking, it's because you probably just went through Meet directly. If you go to your class, you may or may not have a Meet code already generated. Now, this is the link that everybody in the class is going to use to join you in your virtual classroom. If there's nothing here, it will just say generate link. Once we click it, you'll have an option that says visible to students. Now, you might get a lot of advice saying that you want to turn it off so students can't join when you're not there. In reality, you can leave it visible all the time. Students can never enter a Meet without you already being in the room, you or a co-teacher. So you can leave it on. If you prefer, you can turn it off when you're not using it, but I think it's just easier to leave it on all the time. We press save, and you'll notice that before there was a big Meet link in the header. Now it's just a big button, which is a lot easier. You'll see it's visible to students. If you press on the three buttons, you'll have copy link, so you can send it in an email, or you have manage link. And with this, you can always reset it. Later on, we're going to get into when you want to reset your link and why. But basically, if there's a problem or if you add or remove a co-teacher, you're going to have to reset it at some point. Now that you've got it set up, all you and your students have to do is to press on the big colored button. In my case, it's blue. For you, it may be another color. Okay, now that we've pressed join, we're in the Google Meet lobby. We haven't started the class yet. No students can come into the Meet because we haven't pressed join now. But before we go in, we want to just take care of a few things. One, we want to make sure our audio is working, and we can see here that it is. We want to make sure that our camera is on or off, whatever you'd like to start. And as well, if you want, for privacy's sake, and if your students want to do this as well, they can turn on a blur or a background effect. I enjoy having the blur, so I keep my private life a little bit more private. If you're teaching the younger students, you might want to go through some of these animations. It might make them it might make the class a little bit more interesting. Students can also use any of these backgrounds that they choose. You cannot turn them off. But this is a classroom etiquette question. Talk to your students about what you find appropriate and what you don't find appropriate in these backgrounds. Now, none of them are vulgar, but some of them, though, do have a little bit of emotion, which could be distracting if they are speaking, right? Because you want them to be focused on what you're saying or what the other student is saying, and maybe not on the cute background. So just let them know what you find acceptable in terms of backgrounds. I tend to just keep with the blurs myself. Once I've clicked on the effects, I can also click on the audio and video. You can choose your webcam, and you can choose your speakers, make sure that those are fine. If you want to preview what you look like, you can capture a 5-minute clip. It will record it and play it back to you so that you know what your students will be seeing once you start. If you are having difficulty with these two, in your URL, right next to where it says meet.google, make sure that your camera and microphone are both enabled for this website. And the three little buttons you have in your video screen, if you go into settings, you can adjust the audio and video settings. If you're using a headset, you might want to make sure that the headset microphone is chosen. For video, I have it at 360. You can change it to high definition, it's no problem, if you have a good enough camera and good enough bandwidth, a good enough internet connection. Students who are having difficulty at home because they might have, their internet connection might not be great, they might have two parents working from home, say a couple of siblings, all online at the same time, that can really slow down the connection. You want to let the students or parents know that if they're having those issues, to come in to the resolution and change it to 360 or to auto, depending. But 360 is good. If they're having difficulties, the video won't be as choppy. All right, so now I see I've got my background blurred. I've got my video settings. I'm simply now going to click Join Now, and I will start the meet. And anybody who's registered in my class will be able to join. This is why you want to have every class that you have, right? Or every separate grade. You want them, if there are different students in different classes, you want each one to have their own Meet link in their own classroom. So we are going to click Join Now and start our lesson. Okay, so we've started our meeting. On the bottom left, you'll notice that there's the time and the Meet code. Right beneath me, we see some icons, which you've already seen before. So we've got our microphone, turn it on or off. Our camera, turn it on or off. Closed captioning, we probably won't be using, but if you want, you can use closed captions from Google, although they aren't that accurate, and it does not translate. Next to it, we have the hand raise feature. This is very important for our students. This is how we want them to ask questions. You want them to ask questions by raising their hand. Once you raise their hand, you heard, there's that little sound. If we go again to our People's tab, we will see that I have raised my hand, and I just lowered it. Once your students learn how to raise their hands, you will see a list of who raised their hands first, and then you can choose them or you can call on them to ask questions if they have their hand raised. Next, we have our share screen. This is how we're going to present materials to our classes. And we have the More Options button. Here is where you want to adjust your layout before your class starts. You won't have to do this every time. It should keep your preferences for your classroom once you do it. By default, it will be auto and 16. What does that mean? Well, it'll show you either 1, 2, 3, 4, or up to 16 different squares. If you have a class that's larger than 16, you may want to choose a higher number. By default, I always put it at 49, and I choose either tiled or auto. That means if we get, say, if we have up to 49 students, once you talk to them in a classroom, you'll be able to see all of them on your screen at once. And next to it, we have the hang up button, or the leave call button, which we'll get to at the end. At the bottom right hand of your screen, you will see the peoples, the chat, the activities, and the host controls. First of all, the People's tab. Once your students start coming into the classroom, they will show up here in alphabetical order. If you want to mute a particular student, simply click on the icon. It will be them talking, it'll be like this, or if they're muted, it will be a microphone like that. Simply click on them to mute them. If you want to mute everybody, click on All Muted. Now, they will be able to unmute themselves. So it's really important that you discuss your classroom expectations of when they turn their microphone off and when they turn their microphone on. This is not a shortcut, the mutes, to be able to manage your classroom. But if they have forgotten to turn it off, if you have a young classroom that or younger students that might not be able, like say in kindergarten or grade 1, grade 2, might not be able to do it themselves, feel free to mute them. Once you mute them, they will have to unmute themselves by clicking here on the red microphone. If you want to add people, you can email them, but that is something that is going to happen more or less if you have a parent who is having difficulty connecting their student to the classroom. Most of the time, because they're already in your Google class, you won't have to worry about that. Next to it, we have the chat button. The chat button is where you are going to talk to your students, and students will be able to answer you back in the chat. As you can see, we have let everyone send messages. If you'd prefer, and you haven't discussed etiquette yet, you can turn this off. That means that the teacher or the co-teacher can type, but nobody else can. If you want to keep this off so they don't start typing questions while you're speaking, you can always choose to turn it off and come back once in a while and turn it on to have a question period. But as you become and your students become more comfortable with this platform, most teachers just leave this on for the whole class. Next to it, we have the Activities tab. Whiteboarding we'll get into at another date. And there's also recording. Now, keep in mind, you do not want to record your classes unless you have express permission from every single parent in the class to record them. And this has to be specific permission for Google Meet and Google Classroom. The forms that you send out at the beginning of the year will not cover this, right? Because some parents will not want their students recorded, especially when the camera's in their homes. The last button is the host controls. Now, only you and your co-teacher will have access to these host controls. They will not be for the students. The first button is to let them share their screen. If you want students to share their work and it's digital, you're probably going to have to allow them to share their screen. If at the beginning of the class you don't want to let them share their screen, or if it's a small class and they're hitting present now or share screen instead of the raise hand button, you may want to have that turned off. Send chat messages. This is the exact same button as is in the chat window, so it's easier to get to from there. You can turn it off. Turn on their microphones. If you turn this off, everybody's microphone will be cut, but it can cause technical issues. Okay, so I would really not recommend that you use this. If you want your students to be muted or you want them to mute, you can just simply go into this tab and mute them all. If you choose this, they will not be able to unmute themselves, but then again, depending on what hardware, what computer they're using, it can really cause issues and they might get accidentally kicked out. Same thing for turn on their video. Unless you're really having trouble, keep both of these on at all times and simply lay down the class rules of when they can and can't turn on their video and when they can and can't turn on their microphones. Now, the last button, and one that's important, is the quick access button. By default, the quick access button is turned off, and we want to keep it that way. What does quick access mean? Quick access means that when it's turned off, students who are registered in your class will be able to come in no problem. They click on the join button. As long as you're in the room, they can join. Anybody who is not registered in your class or who is using an outside of the board email, so like say a Gmail or Yahoo or Hotmail, they will have to ask you permission to join. If it's turned on, anybody with the link can just come right in, and we don't want that. So we're going to then click on off. By default, it's there. We're going to keep it that way. So again, what you want is the host management on. I would say leave all these, share their screen. If there's a real problem, you can turn share screen off. And then quick access, of course, is off. You have another button, view all host control settings. This is mostly the same ones except with your video and audio. So again, if your video is choppy, if you're having problems, just turn it to the 360. And you can adjust the video lighting. That's up to you whether you want to use it or not. Okay, we have one student in the class now, and we can see that it's starting to fill up. Once you get more students in, you're going to see that this display will split into smaller and smaller squares. Again, if the student's microphone is on and you want to mute them individually, you can simply click and you can mute their mic. If they are really causing trouble, you can remove them from the call and they won't be able to rejoin. This is really a last resort, but if it comes down to it, 3 buttons and remove them, and they will be sent out of the classroom. And I believe they'll be able to rejoin once you reset the Meet link. Now to start teaching. One of the main things that you're going to do when you start teaching is you are going to use the Present Now tab. Anything that you have to present to your class, it's better off if it's digital. If you have something analog and you hold it up to the screen, it may be very difficult for the students to read. But you can choose to either share your entire screen with your students or a tab. First thing we're going to do is share an entire screen. If I click on the share screen and then I click on the screen I want to share, it turns blue. You can share any screen that you have. I only have one. Some teachers have 2 or 3, but I have one screen that I'm going to share. So what is my student seeing now? Well, my student's seeing everything that's on my screen. So you can see both my tabs are open. You can see where my cursor is. If I minimize this window, my student is now seeing my desktop. And you'll notice that when I'm sharing my screen and I'm going through my computer, I can no longer see my class. That's why it's really important that the students use the raise hand feature, which will give me a little ding, and I'll know that they have a question. But right now, I've opened up a Microsoft Word file, and I want to show my students this Word file. So what's happening is I am showing them my whole screen, and they will be able to see this entire document. They'll be able to see the layout, everything. So let's say this is something I want them to do. I'm sharing my screen with them. I'm going through it. I can kind of flip back and forth if I want to come back to the Meet to see if there's any questions, and then I minimize it. I go through what I want. I come back to the class, and then I click Stop Presenting. And there, I've shared my screen. They've seen everything that's on my computer, right, that I show them. Everything that I can see on my computer, they can see. So I show them a Microsoft Word document. And then when I had finished showing it to them, I came back and I pressed Stop Sharing. So what happens when I want to share a website or a video with students? Well, we can go back to the Share Screen tab, but this time we're going to choose not your entire screen, but we're going to choose a tab. Why? Because if you present a tab, it will take the audio directly from the tab that is open. And if you don't, if you share your entire screen or a window, what's going to happen is you're going to get feedback and the students won't be able to hear it. So if you're doing a little break and you're showing a video, you always want to choose Open a Tab. Now, before I share the video, I make sure it's already opened. And I've got a YouTube video on nouns that I want to show my classroom. So I'm going to click on a tab. It's going to show me all my open tabs, and it's going to give me a little preview. I'm going to choose the Schoolhouse Rocks. And as you can see, it has completely switched now. And there's a blue line that's around the tab that is being shown. I can maximize it if I want, and then I start. And my students will be able to, or would be able to if I kept playing it, listen to the video itself. Now, what you can do with this, as opposed to share screen, is if I come back and look at my class, I can see what they are seeing. So here, I don't have to keep on the tab. I can just play the video, and I'm going to turn the sound off, but I can play the video, and then I can observe in the right-hand side here how my students are reacting to the video, at least the ones that have their cameras on. Now, once you want to stop sharing that, you can simply click on Stop Sharing. This works for websites or presentations as well. So we've got two sharing options. One is your entire screen. Now that's the easiest one to do, and it's probably the one you're going to use most often when you first start out. Second is a tab. And the tab is going to be if you want to share a video or if you want to just share something in a browser tab and be able to switch like back and forth, maybe a little easier. Okay, now we've gone through the class and we want to end it. So how do we end our Google Meet? Well, as you can see on the bottom, there is a big red leave call button. But, very important, there's two options. If we click on the leave call, we have just leave the call or end the call. If you're finding that you're ending your class but you come back and there's still students, there's a big chance that you just chose to leave the call. This is like walking out of your classroom and closing the door and letting the students leave when they want. If your co-teacher is still with them, or an adult or anybody else who you trust with your students in that classroom, you can just leave, no problem. That ends the call just for you. But if you want to end the call for everybody and kick everybody out of the class, you have to choose end call. Once you choose end call, you and the students are done. You're kicked out and they will not be able to rejoin. But if you're finding that you leave and you come back and there's still students there talking and messing around, it's because you chose just leave the call. So what we're going to do is we are going to end the call and kick everybody out. And you notice that if I go back and I hit join, everybody's gone. I'm the only person in here. The student I had in there before, Chris Tyson, he's no longer there. Okay, so make sure that if you want to kick everybody out, you choose end the call. Now that we've ended the call, we're going to talk about when you might want to reset this link. Again, if you've invited students who shouldn't be there, or you have added or deleted a co-teacher, you may want to reset the link so the permissions reset as well. Now, how do you add a co-teacher? Well, you go into People, and you click on the Teachers button. You find somebody who you want to, say, co-teach the class with, one of your colleagues who also has those students, and you press Invite. Once they accept, they will be a co-teacher with you and they will have the same rights that you do. Now, to give them access to the Google Meet, all you have to do is click on the three buttons, click on Manage. From the drop-down menu in the right-hand side, choose Reset. That will reset the Meet link. And if for whatever reason you have chosen just to send the link to parents and not have them join here, which you really should, you're going to have to then send them the new link. But as far as the students go, they just have to click this big join button and they will be inside your Meet. So once again, if you want to reset the link for whatever reason, you choose Manage, Reset, and you're done. And if you want, you can also, under the Manage, choose to hide the link for students. But like we said, it's a lot easier if you keep it on because you might forget that it's there. And you might be wondering why nobody is joining your class. So we're going to just have that on. Let's review what we've done. We've generated our link. We click on Join. Before we start, we make sure that our camera and our microphone are working. If not, we check to see if the browser has access to them, and we can choose our background. Most of the time, I just recommend a simple blur. Once we are ready, we click Join Now. We make sure that we have our microphone turned off, and our students have their microphones turned off as well. We click on Join, If there's any trouble with the layout, we make sure that our layout is still at the maximum amount of people. We see who's in the class. If we want to mute them, we click on the icon next to their name, or we click on all muted if we want them all to be muted. Under the chat, we choose whether we want to let everybody talk or no one. And under the host controls, we make sure that quick access is turned off, and you adjust the message and screen options as you like. For students to ask questions, we always request they raise their hand so you get that little ding. Under your Share tab, we have your entire screen, which is the easiest way, but for videos, always remember that it has to be a tab itself. Once you're done with the call, you can press Leave Call and make sure that if you want everybody out of the room, you click End the Call, not Leave the Call, unless you want to leave the students in the room with, say, your co-teacher or a child care worker or specialist. But what we're going to do is end the call and kick everybody out. So there you go. That's how you use Google Meet. If you have any questions or you need help in small groups or one-to-one, you can contact the ICT Récit team at the board. You can get our emails from your administrators, or you can just simply email us directly if you already know how to reach us. Thank you and good teaching.